Not yet. There we go. Now we're
There we
live.
are.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another webcast. Today, joining me is Ty, and he's going to sit down and talk to us a little bit about Backbone. We're going to kind of go over some of the basics of Backbone and what it allows you to do. Um, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Backbone and where it fits into the courseware, it's part of the optional health tracker web application that's immediately after the neighborhood map. And ultimately, Backbone is just another framework which is going to include models, collections, and views. And this project is really, meant to kind of let you branch out and explore this new framework, let you explore something other than Knockout. And Backbone is actually pretty common in a lot of web applications and is actually kind of holding together a lot of really, really big web applications out there. So it's a pretty desirable skill to have worked in Backbone and have built something with it. So I guess, Ty, you want to introduce yourself and explain to people what Backbone is?
Yeah, sure, John. So, hey, everybody. Just like John, I'm a front-end coach here at Udacity, and I'm also a full-stack web developer. So I guess the first logical thing to start with is what is Backbone? And it's a front-end JavaScript MVC framework. For those of you that don't know what MVC is, it stands for Model View Controller. And it's basically a design paradigm to help you kind of separate your front-end application into logical components. So like the model provides structure for your application's data. For example, like representing people in a database. You could have a person model, something like that. The view, as the name suggests, has to do with the UI of your application, and the view is always updated based on changes to the model, generally, or reactant to user input. So that's how the users interact with your data and the application itself. And the controller, which is the C part of MVC, you could consider it kind of the brain of the application to some degree. It updates both the model and the view, tying everything together. So we'll go back to John briefly and talk about getting set up with Backbone for a bit.
Yeah, and I think, it's always good to remind everybody too, like what MVC is. I know that should be, for those of you who have gone through Project 5 and everything, should be pretty familiar at this point, but it's easy to kind of forget what each component is used for. And you'll probably hear it referred to as a bunch of different things like model
Alphabet
view,
soup.
right? Model view, view model view controller, model view presenter. And for general, purposes, you can kind of consider them all the same thing. When you start digging deeper, you realize there's like these small little differences, but generally, that what we'll be dealing with is, the MVC, model view and controller. Now, as far as setting up Backbone, it's really straightforward. It's just a tiny little script. It's a pretty tiny framework.
Yeah,
8 kilo.
compressed, I think it's like 8 kilobytes, right?
Yeah, super, super, super tiny compared to like some of these bigger ones you have out there, like Ember, Angular. Um, but obviously, right, that small size means you're not going to kind of get some of the more stronger architecture like you get with Angular and Ember, or some of just the more robust set of tools. Backbone is just like a very stripped down MVC framework. A lot of the decision making is going to be left up to you, and you're not going to have a lot of these sort of fancy ways to do things like you have with Angular and Ember, or some of the other big frameworks out there. Um, but fortunately, it makes setup pretty easy. You just go download it from backbonejs.org, or you can use a package manager like Bower. For those of you who haven't used Bower yet, there's a whole forum post about it, or you can just go to bower.io to check that out. And from there, you only need two dependencies to run it: jQuery and underscore. jQuery it largely uses to sort of interact with the DOM, and then underscore it uses for templating, which out of the box Backbone doesn't provide. So it just relies on underscore to do a lot of the templating and some other helper functions included with that. And the cool thing is along with being able to bring these in from Bower, or bring these download these and include them in your project, you can also just use a CDN to bring them all in and just include them as links in your header tag, or as scripts at the bottom of your file. that's pretty much all there is to it to like get Backbone included in your project. Really, really straightforward. It's not like something like React where you have to set up like an entire build process to compile your code into usable JavaScript. It's really straightforward. It's written in native JavaScript, so it should run real easily just by importing those scripts. So yeah, that's pretty much setting up. I think the next thing we want to kind of cover here is to talk a little bit about models and collections. And I think Ty, you wanted to talk to everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as with most applications, data is a very important aspect of them. So the way Backbone handles your data is through what they call models and collections, which is the same M and the same M from MVC, and collections you could consider like Backbone's database for holding models.
I think it's important to note that the models aren't necessarily persistent. Like this isn't like putting your data into a database, right?
Yeah, we're not working with like SQL or MongoDB here. Yet you can interact with those, but this is strictly providing structure for your data within the code. It's not actually saving it in any kind of file yet, or in any kind of remote database, nothing like that. You can certainly do that, but this is just Backbone's lingo for providing structure for your data. So when I say model, I mean Backbone model, not like any kind of database. So I think the concept of models and collections are pretty straightforward. So I actually want to jump right into an example. So I'm going to screen share with you guys and zoom in a bit so you can see. Where are we? So you guys should be able to see that. John, how does that look on your end?
Hey, it looks pretty good. Maybe zoom in just a little bit more, but it looks pretty good on my side.
Yeah, is that readable?
Yeah, it's very readable.
Okay, so we'll just step through this. So we can ignore the first couple lines. I've basically just wrapped all of the code in an anonymous function. After the webcast is over, we'll be uploading a forum post, and I'll explain why that's kind of important in front-end code, but not super relevant right now. So we can see right here, starting on line 4, I have created a person model, and it's pretty easy. What you do is you take the function that Backbone provides, model, backbone.model, and you just call the extend function and pass in an object with your customizations. So just to use the model at the basic level, there's really not much you have to do. All I've done is kind of provide some default to describe some defaults to basically describe like what the structure of every person is going to look like. And each person is going to have, at the minimum, a name, age, and gender. And I've just kind of picked some like sensible, or at least sensible to me defaults, so empty strings and -1. So that's it as far as creating the model, pretty readable. And then we're actually going to use that person model to make me, Ty. So Ty Lucas Kelly, 20 years old, male. There we are. And once you've actually created that variable, and you can make much more than one if you want, accessing accessing elements in the model is as simple as saying ty.get, and then in this case I got the name. Were you to run this code, had you imported Backbone and all of that, it would get a little pop-up that says Ty Lucas Kelly. If I wanted to change my name later, it's just ty.set name and then the name I want to change to, and I am now Homer Simpson, unfortunately. So at the basic level, that's really all there is to models. And again, we'll be providing much more links to documentation and more advanced tutorials after the webcast on the forums. So where do we
become Homer Simpson? Unfortunately, like it's a bad thing.
A good thing in the earlier Simpsons seasons. Maybe not now that we're on like season 30 or 300 or whatever. So that's a model, and then there is a collection, which you can consider a container for models. So I made a person model, and we're going to make a collection called people to put persons inside of. So I'm over in this file now, which I've called collection.js, and we have the same stuff from before. The person model, nothing has changed. And then we create on line 14, or 15 rather, a people collection, and you kind of interact with it the same way you did with the model, which is collection.extend, and then you pass in your customizations. So all we have to do at the bare minimum is point to the model that we want to be storing in this collection so that nothing else gets inside of it. Otherwise, it's just a big array, essentially. We create a collection just by invoking the people function. And then just like before, I made Ty. Here I am. This time I'm not Homer Simpson. And then the way I add myself to that people collection is with people.add. So, again, very readable. Backbone is meant to be simple and kind of stripped down. So let's say I've put a bunch of stuff in the collection, and now I want to get something out. I would say there are two ways you can do that. I could say people.get Ty, which is the actual model. I just pass in the entire model, and then obviously it's pretty easy for it to verify that it has that in there. And then once I get it back, I can get my name again or change things. I'm actually working with the model itself at this point. Or if you provided like an ID number, like a unique ID for the model, you could get it by that. So like people.get 0 or 10,000 or whatever the ID is. So either way is acceptable. There's definitely a lot more that you can do with models and collections, including things like pointing them to like a remote MongoDB database, something like that. But that's not what this webcast is all about. But again, after we will be providing plenty of links and tutorials for you guys to dive into, and the course itself that you can take on udacity.com. So that's all I want to say about models and collections for now. And that brings us to the V, the middle part of MVC, and back to John.
I actually have a question.
Oh, sure.
And I'm not 100% sure if you know the answer, and I don't expect you to, because I'm kind of just throwing it to you off the cuff.
Yeah, go for it.
So like for a person model, if I were to, I set these defaults, and then I say, in your example, it was name with gender and age. If I did something like a new person, and then I passed in a name and a gender and an age, and then I passed in something else like, I don't know, GPA, let's say like a grade point average, just like threw in like another argument into the new constructor. Would that fail? Would it add that to that particular person?
So actually, Backbone doesn't really, I'm not sure if you can enforce the, to stick to the defaults that I specified, but no, you can totally just add in an arbitrary amount of extra variables. So you could create a new property called favorite sport and call it football or something, and it wouldn't complain or give you any errors. So the whole reason we define the defaults is more just for like code readability, and so that, as the developer, you kind of know what's supposed to go in there. I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to figure out if you can kind of enforce those defaults. Okay, cool. So there's actually a model.validate function, which that you can call. And in the case that you did provide like extra arbitrary variables, it would then yell at you. But it's up to you actually to write that validation function. So, again, kind of like we were mentioning before, Backbone leaves a lot up to you. The whole idea is performance and, small size, bare bones. But yeah, so to answer your question, yes and no. It doesn't do it by default, but the option is there.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. Just kind of curious what would happen.
Yeah, it's a good thing to know about.
Yeah, I haven't really tried that myself. I'm usually pretty anal about like massaging or creating my model so it exactly matches like the data I'm pulling in from. So I was just curious what would happen if, something threw, sticking the spokes on that one.
Yeah, definitely good for like a larger team to be able to actually enforce the validation though. If you're working by yourself, probably not a huge issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was I supposed to be talking about? The view.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, so the view is all about displaying things, right? The models and collections are about sort of creating this data into some usable format, but it doesn't really present this data to our user. So that's really what the view is for and what the view is all about. So really, when you want something to change in your model and be presented to the user, that's really what the view is going to be handling. So working with the view involves really just two things. One, writing a template, in your HTML files, and that's going to provide sort of the layout or structure for your view. And this is largely where underscore comes in. Like I mentioned before, that was one of the dependencies for Backbone. And then the actual view code, which is the JavaScript that fills in data from the models and uses your template as a base. So let's take a look at this quick example here that we have written up. Let me screen share. I don't have fancy, or I do have fancy Atom, but I'd rather use Sublime. So I hope that looks good on your guys' end.
Yeah, totally clear for me.
But again, you can see we kind of have a lot of this, wrapping anonymous function, which we're not going to worry too much about. But just like the model, we have this view function that basically says, this is going to be a view object. It's going to be a view method. So we just call backbone.view.extend. And first we pass in this L property, which is going to be the DOM element that we're going to binding to. So in this case, we're just binding to the body, and you can see that this is a pretty standard jQuery selector, just the $sign and then the element. This could also be, any sort of div or any sort of class that we decide to pass into it. Maybe we want to attach it to like the main or even ID selectors. So it supports, anything you can select on the DOM.
Yep, just plain old jQuery.
Plain old jQuery, yeah, real simple there. So then we have this initialize argument, which is basically this function, going to be assigned to this function, and it's going to call this render function. This is basically what's called when our view is created, and typically you just use it to call the render function, but you can also do a lot of setup in sort of this initialize step prior to calling render. So if you need to sort of manipulate some things or pre-manage some data, or maybe make some asynchronous requests before you fully render the view, you can kind of do it in this initialization step. So then this one's pretty simple. Like I mentioned, it just calls this.render, which is our backbone render function. And this is just going to basically set up this pretty simple little template here. It's just going to make this list item, which says, hey there. This.l, as you remember from above, is actually our body element. So this is just a selector saying okay, pick that body element, append this little chunk of stuff. And then we down here actually instantiate our new list view, which will throw it up onto the page. So that's the basic premise of a view. There's a few other kind of tricky things you can get away with in there, but generally speaking, this is what most of your views are going to look like. Stop screen sharing there. And it looks like there aren't too many questions on Slack or on the side, so we'll move on real quick to the next thing, which I believe is talking about events.
Yeah, so back to me for that. If you've been programming with JavaScript at all, you've probably encountered events before. It's just a huge part of JavaScript and Backbone too. They're kind of what make the application come to life and able to react to user input as well as changes to the model and collection that we mentioned before. If you've used jQuery specifically, you've probably seen something like this. So let me screen share real quick. OK, so you guys can see that. So you have seen events before, most likely. So in this little comment right here, I threw in a classic use of jQuery, which is what to do when the click event was fired after clicking a button. In this case, it just logs some nonsense to the console. But yeah, so you've seen events before, most likely. And now we're going to actually work with events in the context of Backbone. So we're taking that list view from before in John's example. So everything is the same so far. The element is the body. We've actually added a little more. I've created an actual HTML file here, so ignore the errors. But there's the body. And we've made a button to add items and remove them. And then here is our list right here. So pretty simple. But I will be referencing that. So bam, events. As you can see, this is Backbone syntax for dealing with events. And you basically create this events object, which is all the events you want the view to handle. And then the key, you have the event name, which is click, just fired upon clicking anything, and then the element that is being clicked, separated by a space, and then the actual value in the key value pair is the name of the function we're going to call. And you guessed it, we are the ones that write that function. So quickly scrolling past, this is the same as before, except we're calling it on the list tag this time, or ID rather. But you can see the add item and remove item functions, and they basically are pretty simple. When you click the add item button, it's going to add another list item. And when you click remove item, it's going to remove the last item. So nothing too crazy. And as before, we have to actually instantiate the list view. But that is actually the basics of working with events in Backbone. Just like with everything else we've done so far, it's pretty readable and quick to pick up on, which is very nice. Not nearly as complex as a lot of other JavaScript frameworks. But yeah, this object right here is essentially mapping events to functions. And that's all there is to events in Backbone. So I will stop screen sharing. And I think we have, unless there's questions, I think we only have one more thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think we'll take questions at the end here, but the last little bit I think a lot of people are curious about is we mentioned before that these models you're creating, they don't really persist. They're not like a model in the sense that it's something that gets stored in a database and that you can kind of retrieve later. When you create these models, they're very destructive. They basically get destroyed once the Backbone application goes down. So in that instance where
the page gets refreshed,
or the page gets refreshed. So like in that instance where Ty said Ty dot create or was it new person equals Ty blah blah blah. That object is basically going to get destroyed the next time the session reloads. So to get persistent data, and something we talk a little bit about you guys doing in the Health Tracker project is utilizing local storage. And so Backbone can utilize a browser's local storage pretty easily. Most browsers have some local storage support. Chrome does, Firefox does, I think Safari does now.
Yep, and the latest versions of IE and the new Edge browser as well.
Yeah, so as long as you're not trying to support a lot of IE8 clients and stuff like that, you could probably get away with using local storage. And so it's a database of sorts, and it's a really easy library to sort of integrate into your projects. And so it's pretty easy to implement. Let me screen share here this little snippet of code. There we go. And let me make this a little smaller so you can see everything. But you can see in the collection that we create, we specify the model that we want, and then we just specify local storage and use this new backbone.local storage and then give it some collection name. So this could be something like, store. And that could, house all our people that we end up creating. So now anytime we, put, information into this local storage, it's going to get saved there. It's basically going to get cached to that URL. And then when users come back, the data will persist at least for a little while, unless they, go in and clear their browser history and mess with a bunch of stuff. But generally, local storage is a pretty simple method for making persistent data without having to go out and learn a huge database framework like Mongo or just the bazillion other ones that are out there. So that's really it. If you guys are looking to learn a little bit more, you definitely should go through our Backbone.js class, which has a lot of great material in there. We reference a lot of great articles, and we'll make sure to share a lot of these useful links as well. But it looks like we have some questions that need to be answered. So how about we go through those and try and hit on as many of them as we can. Yeah, and I'll, if you guys are posting questions in Slack as well, I'd be happy to take them there. So let's see. Roger Woodroof says, as P5.2 is optional, is it possible to complete the nanodegree minimum requirements, graduate, and then come back and do P5.2 after graduating and still be able to submit P5.2 for review? And I actually was not 100% sure about this before we started the webcast, but I just talked with Durant, who's one of our CMs on the career services side. And he says, yeah, graduates, you guys have access to your paths and are able to submit optional projects for review even after graduating. So yeah, you guys are more than welcome to finish up project 5, finish up project 6, and then graduate, come back, do project 5.2 and submit that one since it's optional. If you do have any trouble submitting it for whatever reason, like, I don't know, maybe the system doesn't let you submit it, feel free to email in to us at support@udacity.com and we'll make sure to get that set up right for you. This one comes to us from Udayan, who asks, I'm creating a disposable set of views for third-party data, i.e. they have no attached models or collections. The user can elect to save specific results. What's the best approach to harvesting the data behind that view, or should I just create models to begin with? I'm leaning. What
Make
about you?
Models? Make
Yeah,
models.
I'm leaning towards like the making models to begin with.
Yeah, it's just that's the way the framework was meant to be used, and that's going to be the least painful and most importantly, easiest to find documentation and help for if anything goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have any kind of data that you need to work with, definitely go with the models and collections route rather than rolling your own solution.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. If you're looking for a framework that just you can do something like that with and doesn't rely on like models or collections, then you're probably looking for something like React, which is strictly like a view
Yeah, React
layer.
would be the way to go.
Yeah, that's actually like damn near the description for React, right? It's just like a set of views that you can kind of dispose of and set the state on. And with Backbone, though, I mean, it still relies heavily on well-defined models and collections.
Yeah, otherwise things start to kind of look like spaghetti code, and the whole point of Backbone kind of falls through the floor in terms of clean application architecture.
Yeah, I feel like you'd end up using a lot of like jQuery if you just used views with no model, or you'd end up basically writing the model without meaning to. I feel like that would be the end result. All right, let's see here. I'm gonna check the Slack channels real quick. Bo Chef says he doesn't really have a question. He was having some trouble getting into the webcast, so hopefully we can deliver the recording to him. But he says he's starting a new job next Monday, and they have some Backbone applications there.
Hey, awesome.
So yeah, I mean, like any advice I guess we can give to Bo about stepping into doing like real heavy lifting with Backbone.
So I guess not too much quick advice I can give right now, but definitely look out for our forum post, which is going to have links to much more advanced tutorials that will probably help you a ton in like the workplace environment.
Yeah, definitely.
And luckily, you'll be able to lean on your coworkers' shoulders too to learn how things work over there. But congrats on the new job.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too. Is when you're stepping into, and this goes, I guess, with any framework, and any job you step into, right? There's gonna be a particular way that their engineers are doing things. There's gonna be a particular framework that they all like to use, and there's going to be a particular style that they like to stick to. So you can come in with the basics, but definitely ask questions, inquire about, okay, I understand how Backbone works a little bit, but I kind of need to understand how you guys make Backbone work. Let's see. This one comes to us from Robert. What are the strengths/weaknesses of Backbone versus Knockout? So I guess strength of both of them, I guess, is that they're pretty light, really lightweight. Um, you're not getting into a overly large architecture. I guess versus each other, Knockout, in my opinion, is very much more convention over configuration, where you're sitting down and you're writing a lot of code. Um, Whereas Backbone is, I think, a little bit more structured than Knockout. And so you kind of have a little bit more of this sort of configuration setup where you're basically defining more or less, you're defining these objects and their properties. Whereas with Knockout, you're kind of writing the code, building those objects and properties.
Yeah. And if I can chime in real quick, so both of these frameworks, they're similar in the sense they both kind of fill that kind of smaller second tier niche in terms of JavaScript frameworks. They're not quite as big and all-encompassing as something like Angular or Ember, and as a result, they're a lot simpler and lightweight. The one big difference between the two frameworks is in something that's called two-way data binding. So this is something that Knockout has and Backbone does not.
Mm-hmm.
So in Knockout, it's a little bit simpler to have your views and models kind of stay up to date with each other. Whereas Backbone, you have to do a little more of the wiring yourself. It's certainly not, impossible to do the same things with both frameworks, but that is one small advantage of Knockout, is it's a little simpler to keep things up to date with each other without any like DOM manipulation or kind of manual coding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is. But yeah, so that's about the only big difference between the two. They both kind of fill the same void in terms of like a small, lightweight JavaScript framework.
Yeah, I tend to lean a little bit more towards Knockout, largely because of the two-way data binding and the ease of setup with that. It's not terribly difficult with Backbone. It just is a little bit more work.
Yeah, but luckily, because Backbone's been around for a little while, or both frameworks have, there's a lot of like good third-party code out there and open source code you can find to kind of take care of some of the heavy lifting for you. But yeah, that's about it on that.
All right, let's see if we can help this guy out. Suprata asks, I'm trying to build a Backbone application which interacts with files on Google Drive. Where should I place the Google API calls, in the model or the controller?
The controller would be the place for that. Any interaction with third-party APIs or outside resources should go there. The model should purely be for defining the structure of your data. You want to keep that as kind of pure, quote-unquote, as possible. So definitely go for the controller if you're working with the Google Drive API.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's basically right from the definition of what the controller is, right? It's all the code that interacts with the model and interacts with the view. And in this case, that API call fits perfectly into that sort of piece. Let's see. Robert asks, do you have a screenshot of a sample interface for this project? So a sample of the health tracker. I think, do you have a copy on your laptop right now?
I might. Here, let me see if I can whip something up real quick. Give me a second.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know if I'll double check my laptop too, but I recently did a full reset the other day.
All right, here we go. I can share something. So there's a bit of setup with the project that I have on right now. So the UI isn't going to quite work correctly without throwing a bunch of errors. There's some API keys I need to put in there. But as far as the basic, what the UI could look like if you wanted to implement it yourself, let me screen share.
Perfect.
So that's about that. So you can see there's a little search bar at the top, the title of the application. Search results are going to go on this left third. And then this is the actual health tracker that keeps track of how many calories you've had. So that's pretty basic, not too fancy with the CSS, but that's kind of a good structure for this type of application. Search bar at the top, search results at the left, and then the actual report taking up most of the screen. So there's a little sneak peek at what we came up with.
Yeah, and just since we can't really show off the interactivity.
Yeah, we gotta leave some work for you guys.
but basically, right, you just type into that little search bar, and then like a whole list of categories, or sorry, a list of results of foods would come up. The user would be able to pick one and basically add it to their what they ate that day or week or whatever.
Yeah, and there's much more details, of course, in the actual Backbone course we have on our website and the project rubric.
Yeah, and we definitely encourage you to make it not so plain. We're just lazy.
Do a better job than I did with the CSS.
We're just lazy and need to get things working. So we use a lot of Bootstrap.
I will never complain. I will never claim to be a designer. I respect those that can make that claim.
I know. I was perusing job listings, just seeing what people were asking for like junior and senior front-end web developers, and there is a large misunderstanding of what a front-end developer and front-end designer are. There's so many that are like, okay, we need you to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Adobe Photoshop, and
two different paths.
No.
But if you can learn it all, then you should have no problem getting a job anywhere.
Yeah.
So props to you if you've got development and artistic ability.
I prefer sticking with like some of the more intense development stuff. All right, I think we got time for one more question here, and it's kind of a fun one, which is from Etienne, and he asks, what brand of coffee do we buy?
Oh boy, toughest question. Okay. So I'm a big coffee and tea drinker. I don't really buy any one particular brand, but I am picky with buying whole bean coffee. It needs to be ground right before I'm about to drink it. The coffee I'm hooked on lately, you can actually get it at if you've got a Trader Joe's near you. It's this New Mexican fair trade blend they have. It's very, very nice. It's got a nutty flavor. As far as like if I'm out and about and grabbing a cup of coffee, not too much preference. Starbucks over Dunkin' Donuts, I guess, not to start a flame war.
I guess I'm kind of on the same boat as you. Not too particular, as long as it's not crappy and as long as it's
good coffee. That's the easy answer.
Fresh. I guess my drink of choice, if I had to pick one, is like Americano, just straight espresso in the cup with some water.
Caffeine ivy.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, I don't think we got any other questions here. I'm just going to take a quick glance at Slack. Looks like we're okay. For those of you who are watching the recording and weren't able to get in, I am sorry about that. We're going to do our best to host this on something that doesn't require being a part of the Google Plus community beforehand. I think the next one we're going to do is going to be hosted on YouTube Live. So there won't be any sort of like gate, and we won't have to try and like accept people as they're trying to join in. Anyways, any last thoughts on anything today, Ty?
No, I hope you guys, were able to get a nice intro to Backbone and get your feet wet. Again, definitely keep an eye out for the forum post that's going to be coming right after this. It'll have basically everything we covered today, as well as some important links to code examples and tutorials, things like that.
Yeah, and along with that, we'll be taking questions there. So feel free to post any other questions that you might have. Let us know, where you're struggling with Backbone, where you're struggling with the project. We're always happy to dive in and give you guys some support. All right, cool. Thanks, Ty.
See you, everybody. Thanks for popping in.
Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening. And